Well, we're back with more of Out of the Blue. Hi again, I'm Bob Pondillo. I'm professor of Mass Media and Culture at Middle Tennessee State over in the MassCom building. And we have a special guest today. Our friend Dr. John Weil is here. Dr. Weil is a professor of political science, a constitutional law scholar as well. And we're going to talk about the repeal amendment. Maybe you've heard about this. Well, let's find out more about it. First of all, John, thanks for coming by.
Glad to be here.
What is this repeal amendment?
Well, it's actually a proposed amendment.
Proposed. Okay.
It's an amendment that's been proposed in Congress that would allow 2/3 of the state legislators to come back and repeal either a part or a whole of any existing federal law.
Okay, the state would be able to repeal a federal law?
2/3 of the states.
Well, 2/3? Oh,
that's
wow.
right.
Okay, that sounds a little unusual. I don't know if that's good or bad. I understand that a lot of people are concerned about the power of the federal government, but this
that's
is
right.
Kind
and
of
it's what's fascinating about it is while this particular amendment proposal is relatively new, it actually harkens back to a theme, throughout American history. In the very beginning, when the Constitution was being debated, the anti-federalists who opposed the Constitution were afraid that the new national government would be too powerful. And then, you have times like the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions that were adopted in 1898 to sort of clip the powers of Congress. Right. Obviously, the events leading to the Civil War, the 1960s, and throughout. This, I think, is a bit different than right. most of the other proposals. I'm somewhat sympathetic to the notion that, in federalism, it's important to give both states and national government their due. But I'm very concerned that this sort of throws a monkey wrench, if you will, into the existing legislative process. Might have some consequences that we didn't intend.
Now, would this be because of the health care debate that we're having, or Obama? There's some enmity between Obama and the Congress.
I'm sure that's probably
pushing
part of it,
yeah.
but I think it's really a larger concern, and it dates back in part to the adoption of the 17th Amendment. Early in American history, state legislators chose U.S. senators, and as a result, senators were arguably a little bit more attuned to the interest of their states as states. And in what most people regard as a fairly progressive, more democratic move, senators are now directly elected by the people, but as a consequence, they might not be quite as attuned to federalism issues, and this is designed in part to redress that balance.
As Americans, we've always been very careful, very worried about one branch or some branch having too much power.
Sure.
I guess it's a strain from England and what have you, fear of the monarch.
I think it is. Lord Acton, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Sure,
and, I think maybe what proponents of this amendment forget is that states are still very well represented, not only in the Senate, but also in the House. Every person elected to the U.S. House of Representatives is from a district within an individual state. And of course, this also blends over to the Electoral College, where votes are allocated in part on the basis of states.
So what then gives this repeal amendment juice now? What makes it rear its head right now?
Well, again, I mean, probably some of the same factors that we saw in the last election. Pretty big we had a fairly extraordinary Democratic majority. Democrats tend to be generally a little bit more on the pro-national government, less likely for states' rights. And I guess, sort of my attitude toward it is if we give it another election cycle or two, to the extent that there are legitimate concerns, they're probably already going to be reflected within, within those elections without this amendment.
Sure. Well, take me through the process then. If this thing, is it possible? Is it probable something like this could happen?
Sure. I mean,
the
beauty of the amending process is it's difficult, and some people would say, well, why is that the beauty? Well, the beauty is because Constitution is designed to be fundamental law. It's not designed to be as changeable as ordinary legislation. But to adopt an amendment, you need 2/3 of both houses of Congress to propose and 3/4 of the states to adopt. Now, in this case, that's almost impossible, because why would 2/3 of the members of Congress give up their final power over legislation? But there is an alternate mechanism within the amending provision, which is in Article 5, and that would enable 2/3 of the states to call a constitutional convention to amend the Constitution.
What are we, back in the 1700s?
Well, and actually, I mean, it's a perfectly legitimate constitutional process. It's how we got our current Constitution. But usually, as you know, there was actually a period in the 60s after the reapportionment rulings by the Supreme Court where we came 1 to 3 states shy of having enough states to call a constitutional convention. And I think usually the closer we get to that, the more people, they say, well, you know, yes, we want this done, but what if the convention decided instead to, very unlikely, you know, repeal the First Amendment? Or what if they decided instead to do something else? So usually, often what happens if you get close to a convention, and this is actually how the 17th Amendment was adopted, states said, well, if Congress won't propose this amendment, we'll do it. And the closer the states got to proposing a convention, the more willing the senators were to say, well, let's go ahead and, you know, see if the states want to adopt this or not.
Oh, I see.
So there's sort of a give and take there.
Yeah,
there is.
Very interesting. But let me just go back one step. So it would be possible, because this is a repeal amendment, so they could repeal anything. Is that
That's right. And so not only that, they could repeal any provision of any federal law. So they would actually have, you know, the president does not have, he has a veto, but he doesn't have an item veto. Right. This would effectively give the states not only a real veto, but an item veto. And of course, the great fear is they might pick and choose. You know, they might choose to continue every spending program and oppose every taxing program. Then we could be even more out of kilter than we are now in terms of our national budget, national debt.
And I know a lot of people, you know, if you ask on the street about the First Amendment, a lot of people would say, I think we should shut people up. You know?
Well, what happens
what would
is
happen
we're committed generally to the principle of the First Amendment. The application becomes a little bit more, you know, well, I think everybody should speak, but a communist, you know, a Nazi, Klansman, then we begin to have second thoughts.
Sure. I think all the more reason to let them speak, because when they speak,
I agree.
you find out exactly what type of people they are.
Sure.
Anyway, well, this is fascinating stuff. I'm amazed that it got this far, to tell you the truth.
Well, and again, I mean, right now, as far as it's gotten is you have a couple law professors who are advocating. You have a couple members of Congress who've agreed to sponsor it. It hasn't been approved by 2/3 majorities of
Has it been
each
introduced?
house.
It has been introduced.
Oh, it's been introduced.
So it's there.
It's there. But you know, there have been 11,500 or so amendments proposed in American history. Of them, Congress only approved 33. And we've only ratified 27. So
that's right. Wow.
There's a sieve process there that's fairly effective in weeding out proposals like this that probably have good sentiment behind them, but probably shouldn't be adopted.
I would agree. Well, if you will, please keep an eye on that for us.
We'll do it.
Love to have you back and talk some more. This is Dr. John Weil, our friend from the Honors College, Dean of the Honors College, also Professor of Political Science and a Constitutional Law Scholar, was with us today talking about the repeal amendment. And we'll have a lot more on Out of the Blue right after this. Stay with us.
The yoga chair is supposed to help boys and girls pay attention in class, because we have so much energy inside of us that we would like to get out.